Story 1. The Watcher in the Woods. The first thing that strikes you about my dad is how unflappable he is. He's a man who doesn't scare easily, and he's not one to get caught up in superstition or the paranormal. A preacher, deeply religious, and grounded in a no-nonsense black and white view of the world, he's never been the type to spin ghost stories or buy into local legends. But there's one story he tells, reluctantly, and only when pressed, that still gives him the chills. He's never wavered on it, never changed a single detail, no matter how many years have passed. It happened in the late 80s, and though I wasn't there to see it, the way he tells it makes me feel like I was. Dad and a few of his friends had a habit of hiking through the woods behind our farm, following the creek bed until it met the frontage road. It was routine, something they did to unwind after a long week. One night, however, they decided to take a different route. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just a detour to pass by a neighboring farmer's land where the man kept exotic animals like emus. The guys thought it'd be fun to see them up close before continuing their hike deeper into the woods. That's when they saw it. The house. Dad describes it as something straight out of a nightmare. A decaying relic from another time, like a house you'd expect to find in an old horror movie. A twisted version of a forgotten memory. The kind of place that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand on end, even before you step inside. And of course, they did step inside. They were young, curious, and stupid, as most young men are. The inside was worse than the exterior. The air was thick with a sense of dread. The place had clearly been abandoned for years, but what they found inside made it feel far more sinister. Strange symbols were scrawled on the walls, some in spray paint, others, my dad swears, in blood. He was a firefighter at the time, had seen more than his fair share of blood in the aftermath of highway wrecks, and he was sure of what he saw. The symbols were unfamiliar, alien even, like a mix of Latin and some other language no one recognized. And then there were the messages, graffiti written in English, but referencing rituals, sacrifices, things that were unmistakably satanic. At this point, any sensible person would have turned and run, but not them. They pressed on, climbing the narrow staircase that led to an attic bedroom. Dad says the stairwell was so tight their shoulders scraped the walls as they ascended. At the top, the air felt different, heavier, colder. The room was large and almost empty, save for a few chains bolted into the walls near a circular window. The bloodstains on the floor were darker here, crusted into the wood as though something terrible had happened a long time ago. Then they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming up the stairs behind them, fast, hard, like the clack of heels on wood. They spun around, expecting to find someone, anyone, but the stairwell was empty. Nothing but their own ragged breaths echoed in the gloom. They bolted, rushed down the stairs, expecting to see someone hiding, playing a prank, but there was no one. No one had been there at all. The dust on the floor was undisturbed, except for their own prints. They didn't linger. They ran, trying to make sense of the eerie sounds and the feeling that something, or someone, was following them. But here's where the story gets stranger. After leaving the house, they tried to make their way home using a different path, one they were sure would take them away from the cursed place. They had a compass, and they knew these woods like the backs of their hands, but no matter what direction they walked, they always ended up back at the house. They tried it 10 times, walking in different directions, using the compass to guide them, but every time they circled back, there it was, the house, looming, watching, as if it refused to let them leave. The last time they found themselves standing at the front door, something shifted. They started feeling sick, feverish, dizzy, one of them nearly fainting. That's when they saw it. In the window on the second floor, the same circular window near where the chains were, stood a figure, a woman, hunched, her dark eyes locked on them. They couldn't make out any other features, just those eyes, wide and cold, watching. Then, with a slow shuffle, she turned and vanished into the darkness of the room. That's when they ran like hell through the woods, not stopping until they reached the interstate miles away. But the feeling that they were being followed didn't stop. Even when they made it back to our house, the fear lingered. My dad's cousin, still jittery, went to the kitchen for water. That's when he saw her again, the same figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching them through the kitchen window. They never went back. 5 years later, curiosity got the better of them and they decided to return. The house had collapsed, nothing more than a pile of rubble. They left it at that. Whatever had happened there was buried under years of rot and ruin, and none of them wanted to dig it up. I used to joke with my dad, asking what he'd do if he went back and found the house still standing, just as it had been that night. He never laughed. Even now, when the story comes up, I can see it in his eyes. That fear. That same fear that, for the first time, made me question whether there really is something out there in the woods, something we can't explain, something that's still watching. What do you think? Were they just spooked, their minds playing tricks on them? Or is there really something out there, something waiting in the dark? Story 2. The Watchers in the Dark. I was driving through upstate New York. It was that time of year again, Christmas looming, and as always, I was heading to my aunt's place. You know the stretch of road I'm talking about? No, of course you don't. I can't even remember the damn name myself. All I recall is that it snakes through some of the most rural, desolate parts of the state, and at that hour, the dead of night, the world felt like it was asleep. I'd just finished a long shift, my body was protesting every mile, and my brain was a fog of exhaustion. But there was no way I was getting out of this trip. Family obligations and all that. Halfway into the drive, though, something hit me like a slap in the face. The gas gauge was dipping low, really low. My brother had sworn he'd filled the tank the day before, but clearly he'd either forgotten or lied. A quick flash of irritation shot through me, but I shoved it down. Nothing I could do about it now. Then, out of nowhere, this old beaten-up sign appeared on the side of the road, "Gas, next exit." It wasn't an official sign, just some scrap of metal nailed to a post, pointing off into God knows where. I hesitated. The whole thing looked shady. But what choice did I have? The needle on the gauge was getting dangerously close to empty. I took the exit. The road I turned onto wasn't much more than a gravel path, snaking through dense woods, so thick the trees seemed to close in around me, swallowing the headlights. My skin prickled. Every horror movie I'd ever seen rushed to the surface of my mind. This was the kind of place where Leatherface would come roaring out with a chainsaw, a deranged grin splitting his face. And then I saw it, the gas station, or what used to be a gas station. It was a rusted-out carcass of its former self. The pumps were gone, the store itself was collapsing in on itself, the roof sagging under years of neglect. But worse than that, the place felt wrong. Abandoned, yes, but not empty. I pulled up, killing the engine. The silence was immediate and unnerving. I checked my phone. Maybe I could make it another mile or so before I'd be stranded. No way I was driving into that black abyss beyond the station. So I called AAA. They said they'd send someone out, but it would take time. I had no choice but to sit and wait, hoping my phone's battery would last. I left the engine running to keep the headlights on, because there was no way I was sitting in total darkness out here. And then the uneventful waiting broke. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught something. Movement. Just beyond the reach of the headlights, around the side of the station. My breath hitched, pulse spiking. I snapped my head up, scanning the shadows. Nothing. I exhaled, forced myself to relax. It's late, I told myself. You're just imagining things. That's when I heard it. A voice, deep, rough, cutting through the night. "Hey buddy, come here." My blood froze. I looked up. There, standing at the edge of the station, bathed in my headlights, was a man. He looked homeless, unshaven, clothes hanging off him in tatters. But it wasn't just his appearance that made my skin crawl. It was the way he stood, rigid, unmoving, his eyes locked onto me like I was prey. I hesitated, then forced myself to roll down the window, just an inch. "What's up?" I called out, my voice shaking despite my best effort to sound calm. He didn't move. "You got any change?" "No," I lied. "Sorry." And then, as if from the woods themselves, they appeared. Heads, dozens of them, peeking out from behind the trees just beyond the man. Pale, ghost-like faces in the shadows, eyes fixed on me. Watching. My heart hammered in my chest. There were more of them. They were creeping out from behind the station now, figures emerging from the dark like something out of a nightmare. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. Then instinct took over. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I floored it. The car lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel before catching. I didn't care where I was headed as long as it was away from there. The gas gauge was screaming at me, but I kept driving until the engine coughed and sputtered. Finally, the car rolled to a stop. I updated AAA, my voice shaking as I gave them my new location. The driver showed up, filled me up without a word, and I didn't mention a thing about what I saw. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe it was exhaustion, my mind playing tricks. But when I reached my aunt's place and called the sheriff's department, they confirmed it. The trooper who went out there found signs, blankets, canned food, proof that a group of people had been living out there for a while. I don't know who they were or what they wanted. I don't want to know. But I was lucky. Damn lucky. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the night. If you enjoyed the hunt and want to see more adventures, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to stay updated on all our midnight mysteries, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Your support helps us uncover more secrets and bring you thrilling new content every week. Until next time, stay curious and keep hunting. This is The Midnight Hunt, signing off.